Do you have timber pieces of furniture like this at home? You desperately want to give them an update. You're over this orangey brown tone, but you have absolutely no idea where to start. Then stick around, because in this video I'm going to show you step by step exactly what I do to refinish a set like this into a lighter timber look. My first step was to remove the handles, and with this set the drawers actually had a facade on them, so you can see there that you can't actually take the handles off from the back of the drawer. You need to remove the front of the drawer first, and then you're able to access the handle holes. Once I'd removed all of the drawer fronts and the handles, I moved on to the dresser, where I removed the doors as well as the hinges that were on those doors and the handles, and then I went and removed the shelf that was on the inside as well, just making sure to keep all of the screws and nuts and the hinges in a safe place so that I didn't lose anything. Because this set had a lot of detail, especially on the drawer fronts with the profiles, I decided to do a chemical based strip. When I do this, I like to use POLYSTRIP, which is up there in that tin on the left hand side, and I like to have a lot of tools on hand. So you can see here I've got a selection of brushes. I've got firm bristle brushes, I've got wire brushes, I've got this little thing which is great to get into any grooves, a metal scraper, plastic scraper, my carbide scraper, all the things. You also need to have some pretty hardcore PPE, and I mean some chemical gloves that aren't going to disintegrate with this stuff. You need a mask, and you need to be wearing something to protect your eyes. You can see that I poured the product on, and then I am moving it around to make sure that I have a nice consistent amount of product across the surface. This is definitely not a less is more situation. You need to have a good amount on there so that it doesn't dry out before it's had time to penetrate the existing finish. After around 20 minutes, I started scraping down the surface with the metal scraper, and you can see here that it's quite effective. It comes off beautifully, especially when you've got enough product sitting on the surface and it's had time to work. Once this was all removed, I went around the edge, so the routed edge of the top, with the wire bristle brush, and that was enough just to remove that without actually damaging the profile. If you'd like to see this chemical based stripping process in a little bit more detail, then I have created 2 videos in my beginners tips playlist which go into the process in depth. There's a lot of tips and tricks in those videos, and one is specifically on removing finish from some intricate carved details. For the profiles on the doors and the drawer fronts, I used my wire bristle brush, I used my nylon bristle brush and some steel wool, and this is all before putting any water onto the piece. POLYSTRIP is water cleanup. It's one of the reasons that I love it, but all of the scrubbing on the details needs to be done before you start to remove the actual residue. So you will have a lot of success if you do this on the details prior to putting water on. Once the majority of the finish was off, I cleaned every surface down with hot soapy water and allowed it to dry. For the insides of the cupboard and the drawers, I wanted to have a pop of colour, so I'm giving those areas a thorough scuff sand. I'm scuff sanding here with 240 grit, and for those that are unfamiliar, this is just creating a key so that your primer will adhere to the surface effectively. Paint doesn't like to stick to anything that's slick or glossy, so what you're aiming for here is for the surface to look matte. You don't want to see any shine on the surface. After I'd removed all of the dust from these areas, I used Zinsser water-based primer and my Wagner spray gun to prime. You can see that I'm using a little piece of cardboard to stop majority of the overspray coming out of the cupboard. I didn't tape off. I just feel like this is a waste of time and product on a small area like this, and any overspray that I do get will easily be sanded off when I do my final sand. Once I'd finished with the dresser, I moved on to doing all of the drawers, and there were 16 in total, which felt very tedious, even though the spray gun saves you a lot of time. Once I'd finished priming all of the drawers, I allowed them to dry. I gave them a light sand, and then I applied 2 coats of Dulux Aquanamel in the color Antique, which is a really beautiful, soft olive green tone. Next, it was time to sand, which I am doing here with my Bosch sander and 120 grit sandpaper. This is sufficient for removing any of the product that I wasn't able to get off during the chemical stripping process, and it removes that weird yellowing that you get on the surface of the timber when you have stripped. After that 120 grit, I moved up to 180, followed by 240 grit. For these door inserts, I did follow that same process with scuff sanding, priming and painting, and I'm just sanding off the overspray here, as you can see. For the hinges, I just sprayed them with some gold spray paint so they'd match up with my handles in the end. I had envisioned this dresser being a little bit higher than what it was, and I really liked the shape of the legs, so my woodworking wizard neighbour Richard came over to help me realise this dream. We measured up, and he was able to cut them them for me using all the amazing tools that he has in his shed, and we followed the curve of the original leg with these blocks, but we just brought it up 60
Once
mil.
all of the blocks were cut, I gave the contact points a light sand before gluing everything into place with the help of my little apprentice. I made sure that everything lined up and I left it to dry. My next step was to apply a light paint wash, and if you're unfamiliar, paint washing is essentially applying a watered down mix of paint to the surface of the timber to change its overall tone. You can really cool timber down, you can warm it up, or you can achieve a neutral base like I am doing here, and it's all determined by what color you actually put into your wash. For this particular set, because it's made out of pine and pine tends to throw that real gold yellow tone once it's sealed, I'm applying this paint wash to essentially tone that gold down, to soften it. It's not going to completely knock it out because I'm only doing one coat, but it will soften it. If you'd like a little bit more information about paint washing or achieving raw timber looks just like this one, then I've created some guides through the link in my bio which will teach you everything that you need to know. I run through what ratios to use for what application, how to actually determine what colors you need to put into your paint washes to achieve different results, how to apply, how to seal for longevity, and in my raw timber furniture flipping guide, I have a cheat sheet with all of my custom color combinations with paint names and what ratios and examples of my work, so you can sort of hit the ground running. Once my paint wash was completely dry, I went over the entire surface lightly with an 800 grit sanding pad, and this is just to eliminate any raised grain that may have popped up when I applied that paint wash. I allowed the legs to dry overnight, but glue alone would not have been strong enough to hold these legs on, so I drilled 4 pilot holes in each leg and secured with some timber screws as well. To seal this one, I knew I wanted to use something that was going to keep everything looking soft and natural, but I wanted to add a little bit of color, a little bit of depth to the details. And normally I would use 2 tinted HARDWAX oils by FIDDES. I would go in with their tinted HARDWAX oil in white, and I would mix it with my depth of tone color, which is whiskey. But in this case, I had to do a little bit of an experiment because I was out of the tinted HARDWAX oil in white, and I had their ultra raw on hand. Now, ultra raw HARDWAX oil is a dead matte finish, but it also has a light pigment in it. The tinted HARDWAX oil, the whiskey, that has a little bit of shine to it. So I wasn't really sure if this was going to work out. I did get the go ahead that it could possibly work, but it would be an experiment. So I definitely wanted to give it a go to see if this would work, and I wasn't disappointed. Disclaimer though, if you are going to try this at home, please make sure that you give this a thorough mix because you have to get both of those sheen levels working cohesively together. So mixy mix. Right after I mixed this up, I realized that I hadn't filled the little separation where the leg didn't quite meet the new piece that I had put on the bottom. So I'm using some Timbermate wood filler here, which is available from Bunnings in Australia. They have a range of colors that you can choose from, but I'm using the pine here. Here's a quick shot of my experiment drawer front where you can see the difference once the HARDWAX oil combo was applied. So that's the paint wash top, and that's the drawer front with the HARDWAX. Now, when it comes to the application of this tinted HARDWAX oil, you could use a brush, you could use a 4mm nap roller or a rag, but in this instance I'm using the non-abrasive side of a Scotch Brite sponge, and this is a technique that was shared with me by Heidi from FIDDES, and let me tell you, it is a game changer. You've got a lot of control. I'm working small amounts of product into the timber using a circular motion, and then I'm finishing with the grain. I feel like this is the perfect technique when you are working on furniture because you've got that control, especially around the profile and curves of the piece, and the sponge actually fits really beautifully in your hand. But just remember, you're not using the yellow part of the sponge, you're using the coloured part, the non-abrasive scourer side. Once that tinted HARDWAX oil coat was completely dry, which takes around 4 hours in ideal conditions, I did 1 coat of the FIDDES HARDWAX oil in matte clear. My final steps on this flip were to get those drawer fronts back on, drill some handle holes straight through using the existing holes as a guide. I installed some new aged brass pulls, and if you've made it to the end of this video, I congratulate you and your attention span. Here's a quick reminder of where we were on this set, and this is where we are now. I absolutely love how this one turned out, but I am not going to lie, there were a lot of hours in refinishing it. I definitely think it was worth it though. I love the overall tone. You've got a beautiful pop of colour in the centre there and in the drawers. Those little brass pulls I think make this set, but I love that you've got a lived in look as well. There's some dimension, there's some shadowing, and that's all from that beautiful HARDWAX oil. So as always, I'd love to know what you guys think. Jump in the comments and let me know. 1, what would you price this one at? And 2, is it a nail or a fail?